and the women pleaded with her to sleep with their husbands, and Ifechi, shocked at what they were proposing, sent them out of her hut, warning them never to return. Once upon a time, in a very small village, lived a woman named Nkoli. Nkoli was a very beautiful woman who sold sweet oranges in the village. She was a young widow who just lost her husband to the cold hands of death. After her husband's burial, Nkoli was expected to mourn her husband for 1 year. In this time, the tradition of their village forbids her from sleeping with another man because if she ever tries it, her husband's spirit would not only haunt her but kill her. Nkoli was a very young widow who spent a few months with her husband before he died. At a point, the villagers began to rumor that Nkoli had a hand in her husband's death, and everyone looked at her with suspicion. One day, Nkoli was hawking oranges in the village when a group of young men called her aside to buy some oranges. They offered to buy off all the oranges in her tray, and Nkoli was extremely excited as it was already getting late. One of the men then told Nkoli to drop all the oranges inside his hut, and immediately Nkoli walked into the hut to drop the oranges. They all pounced on her and forced themselves on her. Nkoli passed out and woke up to find herself laying by the bush path. The entire village surrounded her as she pleaded for help. No one agreed to help her as they all believed that she was being dealt with by her husband's spirit for sleeping with another man. Nkoli cried out for help as she was in so much pain, but all the villagers looked at her with disgust. Only one young girl walked up to her and offered to take her home. Nkoli was so grateful to the young girl for her help and thanked her for showing compassion when everyone else turned away. The young girl accompanied Nkoli to her hut, and once Nkoli looked stable, the young girl bid her farewell as she returned home to her mother. Nkoli was traumatized as she never expected the villagers to treat her with so much disdain after all that she went through. The next morning, Nkoli decided to pay the village chief a visit to report the incident of the previous evening, but to her greatest surprise, she realized that the young men who defiled her were the sons of the village chief. Nkoli was shocked to the bones, but still summoned the courage to tell the village chief all that happened, hoping for justice to prevail. But things did not go as planned, as the chief's sons told their father that she, Nkoli, came after them instead. Nkoli was so devastated to hear this, as she tried everything possible to defend herself, but the village chief was adamant as he took sides with his sons. Not long afterwards, the news spread around the village, and the entire village began to call Nkoli a cheap whore who offered herself to 3 men a few months after losing her dear husband. Nkoli could not believe how everything turned on her, as no one was willing to believe her story. She returned home devastated as tears rolled down her eyes. A few weeks later, Nkoli realized that she was pregnant. Shocked and confused, she decided to pay the village chief a visit one more time to inform him of her pregnancy, but the village chief refused to see her. Nkoli, unsure of what to do, went to the middle of the market square and sat down. She began to scream at the top of her voice, narrating her story to the entire village. Nkoli did everything possible to convince the villagers, but no one believed her as they began to gossip and laugh at her, questioning her sanity. Nkoli, on seeing that no one believed her, stood up to go home when the young girl who helped her a while ago approached her saying that she believed her, and Nkoli wept aloud as the pain was too much for her to bear. She thanked the young girl for believing in her as she hugged her and headed home. Nkoli had not felt this much pain in her life. The thought of losing her husband at a very young age, coupled with the incident of the last few weeks, broke Nkoli as she decided to end it all. However, before she ended her life, Nkoli placed a curse on the entire village saying that no one would ever hear the cry of a baby in the village. The next morning, news of Nkoli's death spread around the village, and the villagers all speculated that Nkoli was most likely killed by the spirit of her late husband, and the entire village carried on like nothing ever happened. A few years later, the villagers all noticed that no one had been able to conceive in years. This was troubling, as they wondered what could have happened. Little did they know that their village was under a curse. The cry of a baby was one sound that never echoed through the length and breadth of the village. All the children born before the curse was placed had all begun to grow, and the newly married couples had no children to call their own. The villagers, troubled by what was happening, sought the counsel of the village chief, who consulted with the gods and was told that Nkoli, the poor widow, placed a curse upon the village before she died. The village chief then inquired to know how the curse could be broken, and the chief priest told him that the gods were silent and that he would keep consulting the gods to find a solution. Months passed, and the gods had still not spoken. The villagers were now getting desperate as they decided to find a solution by themselves. One morning, during a meeting, one woman suggested that the villagers should start marrying people from the neighboring village to see if the curse would be lifted. This sounded like a good idea, but when the villagers got married to people from the neighboring villages, they still had no children. Things became worse as people from the neighboring villages stopped marrying from their village as they got to know about the curse. For over 10 years, no one ever gave birth in the village till one fateful day when the villagers heard that a woman was pregnant. It was said that the young woman got married to a man from the neighboring village and got pregnant shortly afterwards. This was the first woman to get pregnant in over 10 years, and the entire village could not believe their eyes. They all wondered how she was able to conceive, despite the curse looming over their village. Her name was Ifechi, and she was the only pregnant woman in the whole of the village. As Ifechi's pregnancy became known, a mix of hope and fear swept through the village. The villagers observed her closely, half expecting tragedy to befall her as a result of the lingering curse. However, months passed, and Ifechi's pregnancy continued to progress without any complications. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and the entire village was in awe as they had not heard the cry of a baby in over 10 years. The villagers held a meeting as they deliberated on the way forward. A certain woman named Obiangeli, who had been married for 7 years without a child, suggested that Ifechi could help them get pregnant as she was not affected by the curse. All the other women agreed as they were all desperate to have a child. They visited Ifechi to inform her of their decision, and Ifechi, without thinking twice, turned down their request, and the women pleaded with her to sleep with their husbands, and Ifechi, shocked at what they were proposing, sent them out of her hut, warning them never to return. Despite Ifechi's refusal, the desperate women persisted as they were fueled by their longing for a child. They began to spread rumors around the village that Ifechi had a hand in what was happening in the village, and the atmosphere in the village became extremely tense for Ifechi, who felt the villagers' resentment and envy for her. One night, Ifechi noticed that her daughter suddenly fell ill. Her stomach was protruding, and Ifechi wondered what could be wrong. She rushed her daughter to the healer's hut, but the healer refused to heal her daughter, saying that since Ifechi refused to have children for them, then she has no business seeking for her healing power. The healer sent Ifechi away, not caring that the little baby was on the brink of death. Ifechi was so terrified as she watched her little daughter struggle for her life. The next morning, Ifechi's husband rushed to the village chief to plead for help. He urged the chief to speak to the healer to heal their sickly daughter, but the village chief was adamant to help him. Ifechi and her husband then decided to leave the village to her husband's own village to look for help. On their way out of the village, a small group of women approached them and revealed that they had the cure to their daughter's sickness. They revealed that they were all tired of the evil being carried out in the village by the people and wanted to put an end to it. They told Ifechi how a group of villagers believed that causing harm to Ifechi's daughter could break the supposed curse of infertility. So, one day, a secret meeting was called where discussions were carried out to kill Ifechi's daughter through diabolical means. However, the women revealed to Ifechi that their hearts could not let them do such evil to an innocent baby, so they decided to figure out a way to break the evil spell placed on Ifechi's daughter. They had to journey to the outskirts of the village to meet a very powerful woman who gave them the antidote, which they immediately brought to Ifechi. Ifechi and her husband were so grateful to the women for their kind gesture. Ifechi, without wasting any time, gave her daughter the antidote, and her daughter's health was immediately restored. Ifechi, on seeing this, burst out in tears as she thanked the women for healing her daughter. The next morning, the villagers were shocked to see that Ifechi's daughter's health had been restored. All efforts to bring harm to the baby proved futile, and they all wondered how that could be. A few weeks later, the villagers noticed that a group of women were now pregnant. Everyone opened their mouths in shock as they wondered how this was possible. Little did they know that Ifechi's baby, who they planned to kill, was the only one who could lift the curse placed upon the villagers. When Nkoli laid the curse on the villagers, she blessed the womb of only one person, the little girl who helped her and believed in her when no one else did. That little girl was Ifechi, who grew up to be the only woman with a baby in the village. Nkoli blessed Ifechi's womb, saying that she would be fruitful and that anyone who shows Ifechi and her children genuine kindness would be freed from the curse. That was why the women who saved Ifechi's daughter's life all got pregnant. When the other villagers caught wind of the information, they began to shower Ifechi and her daughter with so much love, but it was already too late, as their hearts were already tainted with hatred, and the love they showered on them was not genuine but pretentious love. The village chief's sons and wives never had children too, and that was how the village chief's lineage ended with his wicked sons. Only Ifechi and those who genuinely showed them love were set free from the curse, as the remaining women remained barren all the days of their lives. The lesson to be learned from this story is that our actions have consequences. We should learn not to bear false witness against our neighbors and not be quick to jump into conclusions about people. Do not always believe what you hear about others, because there are three sides to every story and only one is the truth. Always show kindness to others, because kindness is something that benefits us all. Finally, no matter what happens in your life, suicide should never be the solution, I hope you enjoyed the story.
Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.